Hey guys, welcome back to the YouTube channel. So today, Chris, Josh and I are going to be talking about hip pain and some ways that you can look at addressing hip pain depending on where it is or how you squat or deadlift. So one of the best ways we can start looking at hip pain issues is looking at our stance for lifting. So if we take a look at Chris here, well, the two main stances we tend to deal with is something that's a little bit more narrow. So a lot of narrow stance squatters or conventional deadlifters will be with their feet directly underneath them. And then the second stance is more of a wide stance, think very much like more of a sumo position or a super wide stance low bar squat. So stances will be anywhere between these two kind of end ranges, and depending on where you stand in a lift, like a deadlift or a squat, we can use that information to try and predict or think about what kind of exercise you want to do to fix it.
So if we're a close stance lifter, something that we want to typically try to include more of in our program is something like a stiff leg deadlift, so that way we can try to improve more of that hip internal rotation Tom was mentioning earlier. So as you can see with Josh here, Josh is a close stance lifter when he does his deadlifting. So what we've got set up for Josh is a heel elevated stiff leg deadlift. What we're going to work on with Josh is trying to keep his center of mass forward a little bit more into the toes, not letting his hips shift back too much. But the big focus is for Josh here to try to restore more of that hip internal rotation. He's trying to keep his legs locked as straight as he can when he goes through a stiff-legged deadlift here, okay? So what will cue Josh here is trying to think about squeezing his quads as best he can. As he's squeezing his quads, then just trying to bow forwards as best he can, without letting his knees bend. So if he goes only just to above his knees before the knees bend, then that is more than okay in terms of range of movement. The focus again is trying to make sure that we can go through some hip flexion while making sure that the quads are as locked as possible. As you can see here, Josh is quite stiff, so not needing to go too far down below his knees is ideal again for Josh.
So as Chris was saying before, if you're a narrow stance lifter, you want to be probably looking at a little bit more hip internal rotation. If you're a wide stance lifter, we want to be looking at a little bit more hip external rotation, okay? So what Tom's going to do here, he's going to go through a hamstring bridge. He's going to be digging his heels really hard into that bench there, and also adding a band around the knees is just going to create that little bit more external rotation as his hips come up towards the roof. So we're going to cue Tom hips up towards the roof as high as possible, while also maintaining a little bit of tension through that band. So just to round out, if you're a narrow stance lifter, looking at a little bit more hip internal rotation is going to be really, really good. Something like the stiff leg deadlift is going to create that little bit more hip internal rotation. On the flip side, if you're a wide stance lifter, looking at a bit more hip external rotation, a really good way is that hamstring bridge with a band around the knees. If none of this sort of helps that hip pinching or hip pain at the front of the hip, seek out to a medical professional.